Okay, so the main premise of this problem is that if we're finding the derivative of each piece, then what we're going to do is notice that the derivative and the antiderivative will cancel out. So we're looking at 2 minus, I'm replacing 2x in for t right here. And then what you have to do is multiply by the derivative of that piece. And it's all about the chain rule. So the only way that you really need to clean this up is move the 2 in front. And this is all by choice. Make sure that you understand, I guess, another way of writing that same answer. Because you never know on the multiple choice question. They might rewrite it, simplified like that. So if I should be writing the derivative each time to point out that those two things cancel each other out. So as I look at the next one, the main thing that I would point out is that because x squared is down here, if you did the antiderivative, it would be something minus something, and you'd be plugging in the x squared there. That's why I would go ahead and write this answer for g prime of x is equal to the negative of e to the cosine, cosine of x squared times the derivative of x squared, which would be 2x. And again, if you're trying to clean this up, then you would rewrite the problem this way. So that's why the author of this went ahead and put this little note down, is to remind you that if you were to switch these things around, you're going to negate those answers. I don't think of the problem that way, but that's how he does. And then notice that he went ahead and moved that 2x in front. So I guess if I were finishing this problem, that's exactly what I would do. So negative 2x e to the cosine of x squared. All right. And then as I do this last one, same thing. H prime of x will equal, I'm replacing t with cosine of x, we just typically write cosine squared of x. And then the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Yeah. And you can rewrite that anyway. Multiplication is commutative. You can switch the order around. I'm not sure why anybody would do what the author of the answer key does, but his answer is correct. But again, I'm not sure why anybody would do that. That's like I don't know, that's just trying to stump people. So as we move on to the next problem, and we're trying to find the value of f of 0, notice in the directions f of x is defined as this function, and g of t is graphed over here. So this is the graph of g. So if I'm asking you what f of 0 is, basically what it's saying is, well, let's just write it out. As we're doing the integral from -4, 2 times 0 would be 0 of g of t. So this is just a fancy way of writing out that we want to go from -4 to 0 of, well, look at the area under the curve here. We'll cancel out with this area. So if I break it down, to me it's pretty clear that we want the area to be that little rectangle, that 2 by 1 rectangle, plus the area of this quarter of a circle, which is pi r squared divided by 4, because it's 1/4 of a circle. The radius is 2, and that's pretty clear in the problem. So 2 squared is 4 divided by 4, and you'd be left with pi. And I will show the answer key here shortly if anybody wants a slightly different explanation on that. So as we move on to the next one, when we're doing f of 2, well, the way I read this problem is that's going to be the integral from -4. I'm plugging 2 in for this x. Well, 2 times 2 is 4 of g of t dt. And what I notice from this problem is that this is an even function. So we work through problems where we have an even function. So what I can do is just notice from -4 to 0 and then double that answer. So to me it makes perfect sense. I'm just going to double this answer up here. to get 4 plus 2 pi, or you can work it out and find each area and go on from there. So be careful as we move on to number 3, because we're doing f prime of 1. The first thing I would do is figure out what f prime of x is. Well, if we go back to this problem, it's the antiderivative will cancel out with the derivative, so it's going to be g of 2x, but then you have to double because you have to take the derivative of 2x. So if I ask you to do f prime of 1, to me that's saying 2 times g of 2 times 1, which is 2. So if I were to look at g of 2 in this problem, it equals 1, because it's the y-coordinate when x is 2. So we're looking at 2 times 1, which equals 2. And hopefully my explanation makes sense. Feel free to write any question down that you may have. And like I promised earlier, I would show you the step-by-step process that the answer key shows you how to do this problem. So feel free to pause the video, and I'm going to go back to my notes and how I would do this. So if I did the same thing with f prime of negative 2, well, I already came up with the equation right here. So I just have to think, okay, well, f prime of negative 2, that's going to equal 2 times g of 2 times negative 2. Ooh, that looks ugly. Let me just put parentheses in here. So we're looking at 2 times g of negative 4. Well, if I look at the y-coordinate when x is negative 4 in the problem, looks like it should be negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 will give me an answer of negative 2. Now, notice what's going to happen with the next one is by definition, well, let me put it this way. The way I would do this problem is go back to the definition of f prime. Because if I'm asking you for the second derivative of x, well, then what I would do is say, okay, well, we have 2 times g of 2x. All right? So let me just write that first. But if I take the derivative, it's 2 times g prime of 2x, but it's another chain rule, so I have to multiply by another 2. Because you have to take the derivative of the inside. So when I ask you for the second derivative at x equals 2, it's really 4 times the slope at 2 times 2, which would be 4, which, I mean, I would use the argument that the slope right here, it stops. So I think this is probably an unfair question. I would be fine if somebody wrote there's no slope there, but I think, and I'll go to the answer key, I think what they do is write negative 1 because the slope is, up until that point, is negative 1. Well, I was wrong. He went ahead and said it was undefined because g of t is not differentiable. I'm not going to go back and change my answer, though. I mean, I did write down no solution. But I could see why somebody might write this down. Yeah, let's go ahead and just cross that off. And then the other problem was right. Yeah, I got number 4 right. So feel free to pause the video if you want to write down his work, and that might make a little bit more sense than what I wrote down. So as I move on to the next problem, notice in the directions that we have everything's written in here for f of t. And then they define g of x as the integral from negative 1 to x of f of t. So if you're asked to find g of negative 6, that's saying that you want the integral from negative 1 to negative 6 of f of t dt. It might make more sense to write negative from negative 6 to negative 1 if you switch the bounds around like that. So negative 6 to negative 1. Maybe just do the area formula. So we're looking at a width of 2 with a height of 4. So we're looking at negative of half of 2 times 4 would be 4. And then we have to subtract when we're below the curve. And to me, this is kind of obvious that this area would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the total area, 4 minus 5 is -1. The negative of that would make that positive. And then you can do the same work for the next one. We're doing g of 6, so from -1 to 6 of f of t. Well, now we don't need to negate because it makes sense to just go from left to right. So notice, though, if you start counting the boxes here, which is kind of nice, or you can use a trapezoid formula, whatever you need to find that area from -1 to 4. And then notice that 6 is another quarter of a circle from 4 to 6. So as I'm reading that, we actually just did the math on that quarter of a circle with a radius of 2 is an area of pi, and then I would negate because the rest of that area is below the curve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which is kind of nice that sometimes you can just count the boxes if they give you it in a grid form like this. So as I look at g prime of 6, you might want to just start is, what is g prime of x? Well, if you go back to the definition, it's just f of x, because you don't have to worry about the chain rule because the derivative of x is 1. So g prime of x is equal to f of x. This will get you a point on the curve. When you take the AP test, sometimes just writing that definition is all you need to get 1 point. Whoops, I should be writing f of 6 though. So f of 6 looks like the y-coordinate's 2 right there. And g prime of 2 is equal to f of 2. So as I go back to that curve, f of 2 looks like it's -2. And again, I'm just checking my work. If you want to hit pause along the way, copy down any of the work that he does, that's fine with me. You can see 2 and -2. And then as we get to the second derivative, it makes more sense now to write the formula based off of this statement right here, that g double prime is equal to f prime of x. So g double prime of 2 would be equal to f prime of 2. Well, if you look at x equals 2, we have that sharp turn, some sort of cusp or node, which means that there is no solution. There's none. It's undefined. Whereas if you look at g double prime of -4, we're looking at f prime of -4, which looks like to me is clearly a slope of -2. And you know me, I like to see how he phrases things. He calls it a cusp at x equals 2, whereas this one represents the slope of the tangent line drawn at that curve. So kind of nice way of him phrasing it there for you to hit pause and write this down. I think what I want to do is just show you the answer to the last problem, because I don't want to make a third video. I'll let you sort of try to answer these on your own. You have the definition of G here. So if you want to hit pause and try to figure out these last page of notes on your own, go for it. Then hit pause as you're working through it. I guess I should show you that so you can hit pause now, see if you get the same answer. And then the last question, go ahead and try this on your own, hit pause, and you should be ready for your homework now, 7.1, in case you didn't catch the last two problems. All right, I'm going to end the video now.